Okay, apparently we're doing this in parts. I'm still trying to figure out why this phone keeps thinking it's got not enough storage. It's got 3 gigs. So this may end up being a multi-part video. So part 1 is uploading. We'll continue on. So where I left off, Sandy Shores. Woo! Sandy Shores. And then we've got this piece, which I really love and have great plans for. And it came about as a bit of an accident. She was dyeing one and said, well, this is kind of a mistake piece, but I really like it. And I was like, oh, that's gorgeous. And so we started brainstorming names, and I suggested Time Machine. And she really, really liked it. And then a couple days later, she goes, well, I've decided I'm going to call it Garrett's Time Machine. So I have a piece of fabric named after me, and it's beautiful. So I'm really thrilled. I plan to do Longfellow's Round Tower from Tempting Tangles on it. It's beautiful. I love it so much. Thank you, Lourdes. I love you. So, honestly, of the 3 hand dyers out there, I haven't found one that I really dislike. But if someone held a gun to my head, I don't think I could pick between Lourdes or Under the Sea. They're both fantastic. So if you're looking for a fabric of the month, I recommend both, because they're both fantastic. Very, very nice ladies. Very, very talented ladies. Alright, so we'll do the WIP updates. That way, if you're not interested, because I think part 3 is going to be the Oz update, you can watch the Oz update. But we're going to try and get everything into this one. So, I started the Clouds Factory postcards. This is on Winterbrook from Hand Dyed Fabrics by Leslie. Not Hand Dyed Fabrics by Leslie. Under the Sea Fabrics by Leslie. Please forgive me, Leslie. I know who you are. And it's a really pretty color. It's in some lights blue, some lights gray, some lights green. I mostly have I've stuck to the color scheme Clouds Factory provided. I did, in some cases, swap out for things I had in my stash. But here's what I got so far. So I'm almost done with Venice. If I hadn't had all the issues I've had with videos, I actually might have finished Venice tonight. I still might, because I'm drinking a caffeinated Dr. Pepper because I'm an idiot. So I could be up late. I have pause on my... So I started that. I'm having a lot of fun. I really like Clouds Factory. So I'm working on that. And then I finished my 2 parts of Scream House. So this month I did the floor base for the interior, and I did my last remaining roof piece, which you can't quite see right now because of where I've got the frame. But I have all of the outside done now. Ta-da. So I'm working on, right now at work, the rest of the outlining. What I will probably do, just to make things easier, is during my lunch breaks, if I when I finish a piece, is I may go ahead and just do, like, for the walls, I may go ahead and do the outline border of the walls, just to give myself a little bit of... Or I may just be continually working on this at lunch. We'll see. But those are the WIP updates. Yay! Alright, so I guess... Wow, I really didn't have as much of the WIP updates as I thought I did. So I guess now it's time for my little discussion on Miss Dorothy Gale from Kansas. One of the things, and this is a big, big kudos to Brooke, is and she's told me before, she really wanted to be a costume designer. So she does a lot for making sure things are as period accurate as possible, and she does a lot of lovely little details and color choices that are very, very true. So that's one of the things I kind of want to talk about, is just how impressive Brooke is. But primarily, I want to discuss a little bit about Dorothy Gale. I need to grab a copy of Oz real quick. Alright. So, and this is not my Oz artifact, but if you've never read the books, The books are obviously turn of the century, the last century. There is a lot of basis in Baum's world and the things that Baum saw around him. Dorothy was actually a niece of his who died in infancy. The stories were created out of the things around him. The name Oz supposedly comes from his filing cabinet. He was telling stories about this land, and one of the children said, well, what is it called? And he looked over at the filing cabinet, and it was A to N, O to Z. And he went, Oz. That's where Oz came from. So Dorothy is described... Well, okay, first you have to look at the time period itself. The MGM movie transferred it to the 30s for obvious reasons. But when Baum wrote, this was 1900. The book itself was written probably over the course of 1899, early 1900, published around Christmas of 1900. Therefore, the fashions would reflect that time. Baum lived in South Dakota for a number of years before moving to Chicago. Chicago was and the White City, particularly, were the basis for Emerald City. Munchkinland was inspired. The domed roofs were inspired partially by Greece and partially by the tropics, and what Dinslow saw there. So there are real life references for Oz that were around. So that's one of the things you have to kind of look at. Dorothy in the books doesn't actually have an age. She also actually doesn't have a race. It's interesting. You look at it, and she's 99.9% of the time illustrated as a white girl, which realistically, given the time frame, would probably have been much more logical, or to the average person. And being a predominantly white culture then and still, a white Dorothy just sort of, no one really bats an eyelash. But unlike Alice or Wendy, where they were clearly upper class London, Dorothy is common. She's an orphan. She lives with her aunt and uncle, and they're poor. There's no getting around it. In fact, in the 6th book, Dorothy is going to have to go live at a home for children, and Aunt Tim and Uncle Henry are going to have to go to an old folks' poorhouse, essentially, because they can't afford the mortgage on the farm anymore. I mean, these are not wealthy people. Dorothy would not have worn that little crisply starched pinafore, even if she had gone to school, which it's debatable if she did or not. She also would not have worn, like, this Samantha or any of the Meet Me in St. Louis characters. She would not have been wearing those pretty pinafores. She would have been wearing plain cotton work dresses. They probably would have had a Peter Pan collar, or Peter Pan styled collar. She'd have worn an apron. She would have worn stockings to protect her legs. She would have worn about calf-high boots, which is very much how she's originally illustrated. And in fact, the blue gingham dress probably wasn't gingham, to be totally honest. She would have been... she's described in the book as... Let's see. She only had one other dress, but it happened to be clean and was hanging on a peg beside her. Oh, I guess it was gingham. Okay, never mind. It was gingham, with checks of white and blue, and although the blue was somewhat faded with many washings, it was still a pretty frock. She also wore a pink sunbonnet, which is the ugliest fucking thing ever. Like, every time I've seen any illustrator actually go, oh, she has a sunbonnet, we should probably put her in a sunbonnet. It looks terrible. It does. I'm sorry. Hideous. So Brooks very smartly designed her like she would have been. Now, Brooke charted her with black because I wanted to really show off the color of the shoes. I went with lighter stockings. Black would have been the most common. Gray would have been fairly common, and while this is not 100% the complete color that it would have been, this is a printing from 1935. where they were using only, I think, 8 colors. You can see she's in blue. She's wearing blue stockings. So blue probably was available. Most likely, though, Brooke is correct. They would have been charted black, or possibly it would have been black or possibly gray. She would have worn leatherwork boots that probably came up to about the mid-calf, maybe a little shorter. Certainly, they came over her ankles, so it's probably somewhere in that ankle to mid-calf range is how tall they came up. Toto is described as being an all-black dog. Scotty is a fairly accurate representation. She would have worn braids. If she'd even had longer hair. A lot of children in those days kept it was shorter because it was easier to maintain. Still is. But one of the things I think Brooke really captures is she captures the youth of Dorothy. The charm and style and joy. Because everything else in Kansas is described as being gray, except for her. And so I think that's something that Brooke really captured. And realistically, Dorothy, if you go in a chronological time setting, and you assume that it depends. If you assume that the books, each year a book came out represents a physical year, then Dorothy's going to age 10 years between the time she first arrives in Oz to when she moves to Oz. And in Oz, nobody ages, apparently, once you get to adulthood. So Dorothy would be about, if you looked at it that way, Dorothy would be 6 in Wizard to be about 16 in Emerald City. And Dorothy's gone for a lengthy period of time. The movie really condenses it. Dorothy's gone a good 9 months. She even makes the comment that Antim must have come out of mourning by now. Because she's gone so long. They really genuinely believe she's dead. And then here she is. And she's not dead. Even better. It's like the Changeling, only happy. God, that was a very dark comment. But you could condense the timeline of the books and make her between about 8 when she first goes to Oz, and 12 when she stays in Oz, 12 to 14. So she caught the right age. So there's a lot going here. And I really, really, really love it. One other interesting note, Dorothy's hair color is never described. She's, as you probably saw, she's got sort of a brownish, auburny red hair. But in the second book, when Ozma's introduced, Ozma has dark black hair. So, to make things easier to distinguish in printing, Dorothy becomes a blonde. So, somewhere between 1900 and 1904, Dorothy goes blonde. So there you go. So that's kind of my little mini essay on Dorothy. Really fast, I'm going to do my Oz item, which are something you probably are all quite familiar with. Pop figurines. I only have 3 of the 7. If anyone finds the other 4, Scarecrow, Tin Man, Lion, or Glinda, at a decent price, grab them. I will happily pay you for them. But I have little Miss Dorothy Gale with Toto and her little ruby slippers. I've got Nico, the flying monkey. And I've got the supreme evil Wicked Witch of the West. So these 3 were actually released first, and then they released the other 2 the next year, or the other 4 the next year. Unfortunately, only one of the Barnes & Nobles in my area got them, and I didn't have the money at the time they came, and then when I did have the money, they were all sold out. So I missed them. So if anyone comes across them, I would definitely like to have them so I can finish out my series. So, and I guess that's kind of it. So I'm going to stop it here. You saw my whips, you saw my haul. Ask me more questions, and I will see y'all soon.